morning, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure to come after Josue. We met 20 years ago or more, at the risk of aging us both, when I worked in his country, Mali. So it's always wonderful to interact with him in my country, here in Ethiopia. I think Dr. Dioni has given us a very rich elaboration, not only what's called the inventory of really where we are, but also some directions forward. So at the risk, and you will call me on this, at the risk of not talking about what I do here, the commodity exchange, I'm going to pretty much focus on that forward-looking agenda that Dr. Dioni has elaborated, and try to put it in just a few minutes and a very few brief slides, some context of how I think we need to go forward. This morning, Schengen and then Monty both talked about doing business unusual, and I keep going to conferences where we talk about this concept, doing business unusual. But it strikes me that we have yet to really define what it is we actually plan to do when we talk about doing business unusual. So I'm going to try to take a bit of a stab at that question. The 5 action points that Josue's presentation concluded on, very important 5 key pillars, was the research side to support continued advances in productivity, investment in production and market infrastructure, facilitating and promoting agro-industry and agribusiness, access to financing. I think he made some really excellent points about innovative financing and how we have to think bigger and better. And then finally, the capacity side, the organizational side. So I think if we take all 5 of these, and I think we really got a very rich presentation, I'd like to sort of think about how we can move forward on these points. So for me, I think we'd like to think about how can we rethink what we call this agricultural transformation and what it will take. And I'd like to start with sort of what we used to think of as what we in this agricultural transformation business, those of us who have studied agriculture or agriculture economics, who've worked for development institutions like the FAO or IFAD or IFPRI or many others, ECA of course, and many, many others, what we sort of started by thinking what our agenda was had to do with the things that you see on the left side. Of course, soil and water, seed, fertilizer, the big question, how to increase productivity, labor and land productivity, irrigation, extension, post-harvest management, and then, of course, this little thing called marketing that now we seem to be a lot more interested in the last few years. All of those, to me, are what we should think of as. Of course, it will take all of the above, but it will also take a very serious focus on finance, logistics, storage, and transport infrastructure and services. It will take an understanding of consumer demand and industrial demand. We call that now, I think the new fashion is to call this piece value chain. So we talk a lot about value chains, and I decided not to put that on my slide because the value chain is the composite of everything I'm talking about. It will take an understanding and a clear focus on energy, because energy is tantamount to increasing agricultural productivity. It will take a concerted focus and understanding of how to leverage information technology, how to use information technology as part and parcel of what we talk about when we talk about agricultural transformation. It will require an understanding of health, and I think we're trying to push on that front a little bit more than maybe the others. And finally, we need to, and I believe Monty said this morning, we need to get out of the idea that this is all a public sector-driven agenda. We have to think in this room as agricultural transformation professionals about the role of private investment. And I'm not saying that we've never thought about any of these things, but I don't think our agenda has fully evolved and our paradigm has fully evolved from the things on the left side, which if we were to take a poll of what our individual expertise in this room is, we would be largely concentrated on the things on the left side. How many of us here are in the IT sector? How many of us here are energy experts? How many of us here work on investment climate? Those things we leave to people in other agendas. And yet this agricultural transformation that is core to the growth and transformation of our African economies requires a much broader agenda than what we may necessarily have. Because the new farmer, ladies and gentlemen, is a farmer that is using technology, even as they are grappling with old problems. They are using and linked into a world where things are changing and changing very fast. So the question is, are we changing as fast as the context that we're trying to influence? And the other question is, whose agriculture are we talking about? I think from the morning onwards and every conference we ever go to about agricultural transformation, we're usually talking about the small farmer. And rightly so, because in Africa we know that a large part of our agriculture is small farmer driven. However we feel about it, commercial, large scale, private sector, investment driven, foreign and domestic investor driven agriculture is also here to stay. So the questions, I think, are that as we think about this transformation that we're trying to achieve and how we need to organize ourselves, I think the question is, are we narrowly focused on the small farmer agenda? Isn't that era changing? Are we ready to consider and include the role of large-scale, commercial, possibly foreign investment-driven agriculture also as we talk about Africa's agricultural transformation? And even more importantly, because the share will always be likely that it will be the larger share that's smallholder farming. So the question is not so much do we ignore or not ignore commercial agriculture. Of course, we can't even afford to ignore it. The question is, how do we leverage this dual world we're going to be in? So if you have large-scale agriculture, how does that impact on the larger share of agriculture that is smallholder driven? So I didn't hear really any discussion yet, and I think we have to, as we change our mindsets about what is agricultural transformation, I think we have to address this agenda as well. So the new agricultural transformation agenda, building on what Josue has given to us, I would say is agriculture plus. So what we need is an agriculture plus thinking. And if I may, at the risk of hopefully not offending anybody, I think we have to get out of the idea that the ministries of agriculture are our primary interlocutors. They are, of course, center stage and vital to this agricultural transformation agenda, but I do believe that our engagement has to be much broader. It has to include a concrete engagement, not an occasional sort of afterthought, but a concrete strategic engagement with the financial sector, technology sector, transport and logistics sectors, energy and telecoms, social sectors, and this group of people we call the investors, the business people. We were doing all of these in a sort of a piecemeal fashion to greater or lesser extent in our various interventions, but I think it's time, as those of us who have been looking at the trends on our continent and being part of this picture, I think we have to rethink how we go about this agricultural transformation business. So that means we have to reorganize ourselves because the new agenda will require new capacities amongst ourselves, within ourselves. Our organizations, our approach, and our internal profile has to change. We have to, I think, have within ourselves and amongst ourselves a private business orientation, a much greater technology focus, a more holistic and more innovative approach to to the financial agenda, finance agenda, and this idea of really thinking of investment in a private sense as much more important driver than we've considered it really seriously in our agendas or in our interventions so far. So if you will, I would like to say that we need to start thinking of our agricultural agenda or transformation agenda as a corporate agenda, results driven with a bottom line. Then all of a sudden you have to start thinking much more concretely about business results. You put money in, you have to get money out. That's what business is about. So I think that we need to start running our agricultural transformation agendas as businesses. We need to start saying, not only are the farmers the first and foremost business people, the entrepreneurs that we're trying to support, but the way we intervene has to have concrete, tangible outcomes that are measurable and that we are accountable to, like a corporate structure. And in a corporate structure, you make sure you have all the pieces you need. Now that I've been dabbling in business for a few years, I can tell you that if you're not going to think about all the aspects of it, you just can't afford to run a business on one line alone. You have to think of all the aspects, all the pieces that matter. And because we've been sort of in this comfortable agricultural world, we have been able to afford leaving out critical pieces that now we're trying to bring back in. So my I guess urgency on this is that we have to really, really rethink our approach. And so finally, I would say that very much supporting and pushing the agenda given to us by Josue this morning, I think Africa's green revolution will have to be based on the concept of agriculture plus, unique to Africa, because Africa has, as we said this morning, has unique diversity conditions, unique agroecological, unique population attributes. So our green revolution will be different from any other region in the world or anywhere, any other time in history, but it's also unique to our times. I was in Paris last week at a G20 pre-summit, and everybody's talking about agriculture. Everybody's talking about markets. Everybody talks about food security. 10 years ago, this was not the case, as you all know. So the world is changing, and so our focus is going to be sharper, but it's also going to have to be unique to the opportunities and challenges. We have investors. We have the likes of Soros Fund and others I could name coming in to invest in Africans' agriculture. We have the Indians, the Saudis, the Chinese, the Brazilians taking up land on this continent. That has to be part of what we're going to look at. That's part of our opportunity and part of our challenge. So we are in unique times, and I think if we rise to the occasion, this is Africa's time. We can achieve this promise of an African green revolution, but we need to organize ourselves a bit differently. Thank you very much.